I see a lot of our speakers are on, so I just want to say thank you for being so prompt.
I see we have Addison on, if you can unmute him as well as co-chair. Hi, Addison.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey,
Good.
Addison.
Just let me know if you guys need anything before we start, of course. Just let me know if there's anything that's needed.
I don't think so. Taina, you are muted again. John, could you yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's not his fault. I just go on mute if I'm not speaking to avoid
Okay.
background noise. I am good. And we will, thank you, Ms. Sexton, for joining nice and early. We will get started promptly at 6:30. Want to be respectful of everyone's time, but the start time is 6:30, so that's why we're waiting. And John, maybe Alita will do like the introduction and set the stage. So I'm gonna go on mute, but if you could, since we've hit 6:30, kind of lay the ground rules and explain to folks how they can participate. We would love that.
Agreed.
You want me to start with like the ground roots first, right? Okay, cool.
Yes, please.
Okay. Welcome. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you notice that you're all currently muted, and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for the co-chairs and presenters as we move through the agenda. Following the presentations, as we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public to speak. You can participate by going to the react icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button. Do not press the wave or thumbs up button as those disappear. We'll only press the raise hand button once. If you press a second time, your hand will go down. If you're calling your phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. Be on lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs will call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions to the co-chairs. They will not see the chat. If you are using an old version of Zoom, you will need to go to the Persons section where you will find a raise hand feature below. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not actually be able to see you. Chat me into technical support if you have any questions.
Thank you, John. So as Taina Barrero, one of the co-chairs of the Youth Education and Libraries Committee mentioned, it's 6:31 and we're going to get started. So my name is Alita Camp. I'm the chair of the Arts Committee of Community Board 8, and Taina and Addison Lev are co-chairs of the Youth Education and Libraries Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to the joint meeting of the Arts Committee and the Education Committee for short. We organized this program, Taina, Addison, and I, to highlight the importance of art education, both performing and visual arts, and the need for adequate funding to support arts education. For the first agenda item, I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers. We're very cognizant of time because one of our council members, Julie Menon, needs to leave at 7. So we're fortunate to have both advocates for the arts education funding and elected officials. I'd like to introduce the first speakers briefly. Lucy Sexton, hi Lucy, has been a working artist for her adult life. In addition to co-creating dance performances and teaching art, she runs the Cultural Advocacy Coalition, New Yorkers for Cultural Arts, working for improved policy and increased support for culture and arts in New York. Kimberly Olson, our other speaker on advocacy for arts education funding, is executive director of the New York City Arts in Education Roundtable. Welcome, Lucy and Kim, it's really a pleasure to have you. We're also pleased and delighted to welcome our elected officials, State Senator Jose Serrano and City Council members Julie Menon and Keith Powers. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Lucy to give us a brief introduction to the need for arts education and the consequent need for adequate funding for arts education. So Lucy, take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Lucy Sexton, she, her. I work very closely with Kim and the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable, and we've just been up in Albany with Senator Serrano doing an arts rally calling for funding for arts and for arts and education. And it was really inspiring to see a real coalition of folks coming together. And I am going to leave the why arts and ed is so great to the expert, although and talk a little bit more about the advocacy and the need for funding for it, because Kim is the expert. But I also will say that just as a parent who raised her kids going to public school in Manhattan, in the Greenwich Village, a very upper middle class neighborhood, Greenwich Village. And let me tell you, any of those, well, you probably know it if you have kids in schools. The thing that the PTA raises money for is the dance classes and the art classes and the music classes and the drumming. And, it always has struck me that, they may want the kids when they grow up to be investment bankers, but they know the value of having arts in those schools intrinsically. And it's why, first of all, why the funding is so important to have it be public funding, because my kids were very blessed to go to that school and have a fantastic dance teacher and music teacher and art teacher. You go up 20 blocks into PS11, which is near the projects in Chelsea, and no, very little arts. And this is one of the great inequities, and one of the reasons why public funding in particular for the arts, there is nothing that can answer it, right? People with access to funding can always raise money for this and that, and God bless when they raise money for the arts. I'm very grateful. But funding is from the state and from the city is critical in making sure that we have an equitable education system. And we know that there's been study after study of the impact that arts have in improving a school's, grades and engagement, et cetera. And in some ways, we understand it instinctively. There's a recent study that was done that I have been quoting a lot just because I think it's really dramatic, which is that was the University of Pennsylvania in 2017 did a project called Social Impact of the Arts Project. And it talked about neighborhoods with a lot of cultural assets having better outcomes in education, in aging, in mental health, even in longevity. They just did an update of it. And one of the most dramatic things that they found was that the difference that arts and culture in a neighborhood can make is most pronounced in low wealth communities. So if you have a low wealth community that has lots of arts and culture, those kids get 91% higher test scores than in the low wealth community that lacks culture and arts. It's dramatic. And it's not, it is part of the ecosystem that arts and culture bring to a school, to a neighborhood, et cetera. So it lifts the entire boat. We are in budget season, both in the state and the city. And I have been using that stat to talk about, because I know our electeds are very concerned right now about all of the cuts that are coming, right? All of the threats that the federal government is threatening, our healthcare, and certainly education is right there. And funding the arts is one thing that you can do with a minimal investment that makes a big difference in in the education outcomes, in community strength, et cetera. But I really think we're here to talk about education, and it's going to be very dramatic in education, right? The cuts to education are going to be intense, and we know that often those cuts go first to the arts. And that's what a poor, struggling principal of a poor, struggling school, thinks, well, let's cut that because we need the math and we need the science. We do need it. We need all of those things. But we really need to fund the arts, and many ways that the kids in schools can have access to arts is when they partner with a cultural organization. So you have opening act, it's a theater program run by one of the Arts and Education Roundtable's board members. And they do theater programs in schools that don't have any arts classes in them, in New York City public schools. And they get funding from the state so that they can do that work. So this is a way that, this is a critical part of why funding the arts in general is beneficial to education. We, of course, need to pass mostly, and I will let Kim talk to this more in more depth, mostly policies asking them to require arts in every school in the city and in the state. But funding of the arts and funding of the arts in a way that will make it more equitable so that every school, every kid in every school has access to the benefit that culture and arts can bring to being in a school is critical. So we are making a push, and Senator Serrano has been leading the push at the state level. And I'm actually going to drop a little auto email you can do right now, or you can share with your networks. We'll send a very generic, I'm a person who enjoys arts and culture and realizes the value of it in my community. Please fund arts in the state budget, and that will go to the governor. So if you want to send take 30 seconds to send an email to the governor, that would be great, because they are dealing with a lot in this budget, and we just want to make sure that arts and arts in education stay top of mind. I think the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll go get my link and put it in the link and pass to Kimberly, is just that, with new arrivals, right? New New Yorkers, those kids are flooding the schools. They may not speak English. They may be traumatized. They may be struggling in lots of ways in that school. What can they do? They can relate to music. They can play music. They can get up and dance. They can engage in these things which don't require language. And it can often be the place where they can not only find joy and connection and something that they can do, but also where they can feel proud, right? They can feel like, oh no, I'm there. I'm going to show them my dance. I'm going to show them where I come from. So it's really critical in terms of the current population in our schools, and in making sure that everybody gets engaged and everybody becomes part of the community and everybody gets educated. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to chime in later when the conversation goes more broadly, but I'll pass back to you, Alita, unless you want me to pass to Kimberly.
No, thank you so much, Lucy. And it's really useful. I know that the arts is essential and very helpful for social and emotional wellness, mental health, career and school preparedness. And some of the issues with lack of arts is that there's a lack of engagement. It actually, interestingly enough, does coincide with increased civic engagement, which I know there's a member of the community board that's very active in helping understand why young children should be more civically engaged. So all of this is a circle, and all of it's important. But because Julie Menon needs to leave at 7 o'clock, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask her questions, also of Councilmember Keith Powers and State Senator Serrano. Then at 7, when Councilmember Menon needs to leave, we'll go back to Kim, or you if you have anything that you'd like to add, Lucy, and then go back to questions for our elected officials. So thank you so much for the presentation. And are there any questions for any of our elected officials on this, on the importance of it, or how funding is obtained, or levels of funding, or anything else that that any members of the public or the community board have questions about?
Thanks, Alita. And I think if folks could raise their virtual hand, and then John, if you could unmute State Senator Serrano and Council Members Powers and Menon, so they can jump in with responses. So don't be shy. Don't all jump in at once. We are ready to ask questions if needed, but we like to hear from members of the public and the community in particular who might have less access to our esteemed elected officials. So please raise your virtual hand if you have a specific question.
I have a question in the meantime, if I may. One of my children went to PS6 and was fortunate to have access to, when she was in 5th grade, an after-school program at the Guggenheim, which was fantastic. It lasted for several weeks. It was open to everyone at the school. There are districts, obviously, that are not close to museums and not close to art centers. How can we, and is it possible to ensure that children all over, I know the Met gets lots of school trips, have access to the value of seeing art in a museum, for instance?
Oh, I'm happy to kick that off. We do a program. First of all, nice to see all friends, Lucy and Kim and others doing really great work, and we've been really happy to partner with them on cultural funding in our institutions and cultural funding in our schools. There's a couple answers to that. One is we have an initiative actually through the city council where we fund after school programs. It's called CASA. It's cultural affairs funding for after school. And that actually brings programs like the Guggenheim or other institutions to the schools to help show them what the great world of arts and also to get them to come and visit those institutions. I know Councilmember Menon and I both fund schools throughout our districts, but every council member gets an allotment of them to plug in gaps around cultural affairs in our schools. And the other part of that is it's something we've been fighting for with the arts and education roundtables, making sure in the school building during the school day, there's also arts programs going on in every school, so no schools are left out. And over the last few years, we've gotten, I think, up to almost $4 to $5 million now to help plug the gap for schools that are without arts education in the school day, but that arts education after school programs, every school district in the city now, because of the council members, gets those types of enrichment programs, and something we think really enjoy as a council member to be able to match institutions and schools together.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Powers, for all of your work. I know that you're an extremely strong advocate for arts funding and a believer in arts education. So on behalf of everyone in New York City, thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a question from Rita Popper, who's a member of the Arts Committee. So thank you, Rita. If you could unmute her.
I thank you, Lucy. I'm a former school teacher, and I know how important art is for our students. I like to bring things down to a more realistic area. I had the pleasure of looking around Senator Serrano's neighborhood for art on buildings. And these are the Diego Riveras of our time. Do we use any of these street people who are doing really excellent art to come, because they would be on a different level to our children, to come to our schools, or to form groups in schools where kids could do art that they are proud of and that they could see because they were done by their teacher was a young person. I think you could learn from everyone. So I don't know, do we have that capability? We're not paying those people. I'm even talking about graffiti artists. Those kids are talented. You look at the perspective of what they are writing on, buses and whatever. They're not doing buses anymore, but it's really good. Can we tap into that? Can we tap into that resource without a lot of money?
I'm going to pass the mic to Senator Serrano.
Thank you. And it's great to see you, Rita. Great to see you, Diana, Alita, all of my friends at CB8, my colleagues, Keith and Julie. Wonderful to be here talking about the arts. And Rita, to your point about public murals, if you look at my virtual background here, this is 104th Street, right off Lexington Avenue. Everyone's seen this. It is one of the more famous murals, and it's amazing, right in East Harlem, not far from CB8 at all. And it's enduring, and it actually helps to identify and talk about the cultural significance of communities and why East Harlem is so special because of its long historical history, its long historical artistic history. I think is one that is worth talking about. The governor, in her executive proposal, has a program called Charm, which focuses on funding for public art, in particular murals. That could be something that maybe local artists in places like the South Bronx and in East Harlem can really get a foothold on what it is to be a public artist and to be able to bring their art forward. I think one of the interesting things about the new hip hop museum that's coming online not far from where I live, and the whole idea of the birthplace of hip hop. I'm old enough to remember when hip hop started, and no one really understood or took it seriously. I don't think people saw it the way you do, Rita, where you see the potential in all arts and how it can flourish and actually add to the discourse. But I grew up in a time when Keith Haring, Basquiat, these were folks who were using art as a vehicle for social change and social justice, and in education, educating people. So when we sort of frame the importance of the arts, I think it's very important to talk about arts in schools, very important to talk about arts in education as a tool for education. But I think it's also important, as we fight for more funding, to sort of go up another level and to talk about the arts as foundational in our society, that historically it has been a change maker. It has made our society better. And the more opportunities we give for the next Keith Haring to come along and not only bring art and inspire us, but also change our mindset and allow us to be more together, more unified. I think right now we're more stratified than ever as a nation and as a world. The arts and culture are really a vehicle for bringing us together.
Thank you, Senator Serrano. I'm going to pose a question to Councilmember Menon. Thank you for joining us. I've been the co-chair of the Youth Education and Libraries Committee for the past 4 years, and we often get parents who come to our meetings feeling apprehensive, right, about complaining about anything related to the public school offerings in our community, because frankly, when they're looking at like the broader city and some of the challenges that parents are facing in less resourced communities, they feel like it's tough for them to chime in or complain. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing within the district and ways that like families and communities can be advocating for schools to have increased funding in these areas when their challenges might seem minute as compared to some other less resource districts?
And thank you to Community Board 8 for putting together this forum and for inviting me. And it's great to be with my colleagues in government. So I'm really proud of the work that the City Council and that Keith and I have been partnering to support the schools on the East Side. As Keith mentioned, obviously the CASA grants are incredibly important. Specifically, we're working with organizations like Ballet Hispanico, Alvin Ailey, 92nd Street Y, TADA, to bring these programs into the schools. But to answer your question about sort of equity and resources, we do have schools in the districts that have extremely active PTAs. And we do know in other districts throughout the city, there are PTAs that do not have those resources, that aren't so active. And so that obviously becomes an equity issue. But we want to make sure that every child in our public school system is given resources and access to the arts. It couldn't be more important. And so I think that, that's something that we're doing obviously through the City Council by providing to every single council district the CASA grant. So it's not just obviously coming to our district, it's coming to every district throughout the city of New York. I do just also want to build on something that was said earlier about sort of just overall the importance of the arts, because I also believe the arts does bring people together. My involvement in the arts goes back over 25 years from the work that I did when I used to be the chair of Community Board 1 in Lower Manhattan. After 9/11, I started a not-for-profit organization, and that organization was focused on rebuilding downtown after 9/11. And I will tell you, the first programs we did were programs in the arts. We did a program called Art Downtown, where we created exhibitions in building lobbies all throughout the financial district after 9/11 to bring more foot traffic downtown. Or we did a project called Music Downtown, focused on music and the arts and concerts. And then obviously the work, and I was extremely active and one of the 5 founding board members for the World Trade Center Performing Arts Center, which if you've not been there, it's now called the Perlman. I really encourage everyone to go down there and see a performance. But one of the things we have to do is obviously make sure that our young people are getting the access to this important arts education. So if they want to pursue a career in the arts, we're giving them all the tools they need to be able to get there. Another program that I was very involved with is called Broadway in the Boroughs, where we actually brought Broadway shows to parks in every single borough. Again, to your point about equity, so for many young kids, they do not have the funds to be able to go see a show on Broadway. So we then want to bring Broadway to them. So again, there's so many different ways that we can be doing this. And I think it's, exciting to have this conversation and also to think outside of the box about ways maybe that we haven't thought of. And lastly, the last thing I'll say is I'm really excited about what the children in our district are doing. So for example, on the Memorial Sloan Kettering project, we have this art bridge where we've got young children that are actually creating the art fence that is now surrounding the construction project. And I also did that a couple of years ago with PS 183 on the longstanding 5-year DDC construction project along York, where again, we did one of these art fences. And I think that's such a great way to show off the incredible creative talents of our young students in the district.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Menon. I just want to add something before you leave, which was how instrumental you were in the construction fence around Sloan Kettering's new construction project. I also want to add that all of the children, and they worked with the art teacher at 183, all of the children who contributed art to that fence had their work displayed. And I can't even imagine what it must do for their sense of self and their sense of the beauty of the neighborhood, because the project, for those of you who haven't seen it, I urge you to go up there, involved the flora that's around in Community District 8. And so they walked around or they saw things and they interpreted them. And it will probably be, I would imagine, a lifetime engagement with art. And I'm just wondering, in the 2 minutes or the 5 minutes you have before you run, if there are, because that's a way out of the box for school children to be engaged in art. And because Sloan Kettering was funding it, there wasn't a cost to the school. So I'm wondering if there are other opportunities like that for school children around this district and any other in the city.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Lita. Thank you for mentioning that. So as I mentioned, like about probably 3 years ago, my first year in office, we were getting tons of complaints about what the Department of Design and Construction was doing in terms of the work along York Avenue. That was really creating massive problems. It was very ugly. It had been up there for years and years and years and was a real eyesore. And so I thought, well, maybe one way that we could improve and beautify it would be to partner with the school and to create this artwork. And we gave them a theme to do a piece of art about what New York City means to you. And then in terms of the costs, we had DDC bear the costs of putting up that art fence. So I do think there are other ways that we can do that. And I do think when there are big, large scale construction projects in our district, we should be putting the onus on the developer to do that at a bare minimum, because it does help to beautify our community and it gets our young people civically involved.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was going to ask a fairly similar question. I was there with Councilmember Menon the day of the opening of the Memorial Sloan Kettering project, and it was amazing to see the kids and how excited they were about their art. They were showing me on the board which ones were theirs, and there was a lot of excitement around that. And I wonder to what extent, I know that different developers are we have a lot of construction going on in our district, to say the least, and I think one of the things that we can do is engage the students more, but also engage other youth programs, whether it be after school programs or programs that are held in buildings. What are some ways that you think that we can sort of continue to engage our youth population in creating art on a lot of sort of these canvases, which are for construction sites typically, but maybe can be repurposed for something more useful?
These art fences are, we've done now 2 of them in my office, and we can definitely do more of them. I mean, another way, we did a competition about dog waste where we said we want to get the best sign possible to remind people to pick up after their dog. And we opened it up as a competition to anyone living in the district. And we got some unbelievable designs. We have some like unreal artists living in the district. And so our winning design was actually a local graphic designer who designed, if you've seen our sign, we have 250 of them. But so there's so many different, I think, outside of the box creative ways where we can be showing off the work of people in our community, young people and artists, to actually improve the neighborhood and get them involved. So, I mean, those are just a couple ways that we've been doing it, but I'm sure there are many other ways that we could be doing that in the future as well.
Yeah, we funded some programs through the council that do work like that to make schools and young people also be able to participate more in well, there's our program Art Bridge, I think Public Color, there's other ones where they're able to go out and actually design, help paint schools and do artwork on them and public spaces. So I think we all like the idea of that match of, you know, enliven spaces that really need it and also help foster creativity and arts and collaboration through it. And the council does a number of those programs. They're really popular.
And I'm just going to jump in. Councilmember Menon, I know you have to hop off shortly. I want to do like a little lightning round with the 2 council members and the state senator. Our hope at the end of this joint committee meeting is to pass a resolution from that we will present to the full board. Like if there was one thing that you would recommend that we advocate, call on, who we write to, that would help you, help us, what would it be? I'll start with Keith Powers.
Sure. I mean, we are pushing again this year I want a arts program in every school. Kim Olson is here, has been doing that. So that's a great one. We've been able to build that, but we want to really call for more funding inside the school building. And look, every year our arts institutions, many that are in CB8, end up in this kind of questionable place around budget cuts. And we want to make sure that our great institutions that are housed inside of CB8 in particularly get the funding that they deserve because they're so magnificent. So pushing back against budget cuts and supporting us in that fight as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Menon.
I keep that, and I would just add making sure that every school has a true arts room, because for many schools that are really squeezed for space, suddenly the art room is also the computer room, is also doing 10 other functions, and our young kids are not really getting the true experience they should be getting with materials, with resources, the kind of space and facility you need to be actually creating art. So part of it is also the physical space as well, and ensuring that every school, not only in our district but across the city, has legitimate true art rooms that are meeting the needs of our students.
Thank you so much. And I know you have to hop. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you all so much. So appreciate it. Good to see everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. State Senator Serrano, just saving the expert best for last. I'm just kidding.
Thank you. So yeah, I think one of the overall things that I think continue to do, and I'm preaching to the choir here because everyone here is already doing it, is sort of moving the discussion of the arts out of the space of it being great or nice if we can do it, but it's not the end of the world if we can't do it. No, it's not good. We can't survive without it. And I think that is one of the things that we talked a lot about at the Arts Rally this week up in Albany. Thanks to you again, Lucy. I think we have something really different and unique now, that there's geographic diversity in the support for the arts that we didn't have a couple of decades ago when I first started. It was a very New York City centric thing. But now, because of new election of folks in different parts of the state, we have new voices clamoring for arts funding in upstate New York, the Southern Tier, out in Buffalo, out on Long Island. And that, I think, is lifting up the entire discussion about arts funding, specifically for arts education. One of the things that I lament a lot about is that when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, it seemed like there was more arts education in public school where I was. Over the years, there's been less of that, more of a focus on standardized testing and other things that I think have drawn us away from the proven method of increased arts funding as creating more sort of well-rounded students who do well and do in a lot of different subjects. I have a bill, it's S1072, that would require the Commissioner of the State Education Department to conduct a statewide audit of arts compliance in the schools, because we don't really know who's up to par in what schools, what regions. Are they really providing what is mandated in law as far as arts instruction? I don't think so. So I think we need to have this audit. So this bill, hopefully we can get it done. I've been pushing this for a number of years, but this could be something that we can rally around to sort of make sure that, or at least get some sort of quantifiable measure about how much arts instruction is going on.
Thank you. Super helpful. How many years have you had that bill? John, can you unmute
Yeah.
Senator Serrano? Thank
Sorry,
you.
I shouldn't have muted. But yeah, it's been kicking around for a while.
Okay.
But again, the state education department, they don't always like to be told what to do. And they're, you know, so of course there's going to be, but you know, this is really something that I think everyone could get behind. No one should feel threatened by this legislation. It really will create better educational outcomes, but we have to drill down on the data. We have to think about the policy. And everyone here on this call is really keyed in, not just education funding, which is extremely important, and arts funding, but arts and education policy. I think it's the other side of it. Ensuring that we are looking at this as a pillar within our educational system, as opposed to something that, you know, kids do for maybe half an hour on a Friday. No, this has to be something that is in daily curriculum for our students. And hopefully this audit and other measures that we're trying to push will raise that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go back to Lucy because she needs to leave as well, and then we'll go to Kim for her presentation. Lucy, do you have anything else that you'd like to add, especially in light of all of the comments from Senator Serrano and the council members?
Yeah, no, it's just I really I think Senator Serrano is exactly right. When it comes to arts and education, it is a lot of work on policy, and you'll hear from Kim about different actions and campaigns that you can be part of that ask for these kind of bills to be passed and policy to require money that's given to a school for arts as actually spent on arts, et cetera. There's many different ways. So it is a lot about policy. The only other thing I wanted to say is, you know, in all of the things that that were talked about, it's the importance of the cultural group that is organizing it, right? Dream Yard in the Bronx then engages kids in the neighborhood and gets them organized to do the murals. So that is where our funding goes, right? It goes to these on the ground, you know, grassroots arts and cultural organization that know the neighborhood, that create spaces for the kids to come in and start to engage, and then that builds from there. So, you know, it's a whole interlocking ecosystem, and it's, you know, really it is public funding is the only thing that can really give that the support that it needs, so that there are folks on the ground engaging everybody in the neighborhood and getting it into the schools, you know, because I do want to think that it is also part of that, you know, these cultural organizations that work in the schools and doing extraordinary things, film classes and theater classes and music classes and dance classes, and getting the kids making their own things. So I'll leave it there, but just lifting up the cultural organizations that are sort of the in-between of making that work happen.
I just have a question, if I may. My understanding is that so much of arts funding goes in high school, goes to LaGuardia and Talent Unlimited high schools. Is that something that is distracting from the need for arts education in the upper grades, or is that because obviously those kids are very talented, those are audition-only schools, or is it something where the need for arts education, and that would be true around the state, encompasses everything, those talent required schools as well as schools in very underfunded neighborhood, if my question is at all clear.
I don't like to speak to the funding, I don't know whether there's more dollars going to LaGuardia than are going to Brooklyn High School of the Arts, which is another great high school. I think that they're fantastic schools. I really was glad when they started Brooklyn High School of the Arts. It is 6% white. So it is majority kids of color in downtown Brooklyn, and it is doing amazing, amazing work like they do at LaGuardia. So for me, what I want is for every kid in every borough to have access to a school like that, and to be able to go in there, and yes, whether I'm going to wind up being a theater artist or not, this is teaching me. I'm being part of a team that's making a theater show, that's doing something out loud that I can be proud of, So I would be in favor of more of those type of schools. If anything, they tend to be an advertisement that says it is good to have these arts programs. And so every school should have them, and every school should be able to do this kind of work. So.
Thank you. And Taina, Addison, do you mind if I just ask one more question, which is it possible to fund artists or theaters or musical venues to be able to support school children in other kinds of programs to expand the reach of the arts or their exposure and involvement in the arts? Is that something that is part of the philosophy or the work on funding?
There are many, it's why I lift up the organizations that are doing it, right? There are many organizations that are providing these kind of links, right? That are bringing kids to Broadway. There's a whole theater program where kids from all over come and they get to do their show on a Broadway stage on a Monday night, so there's lots and lots of amazing programs. They may not be as visible to us because they're not on the evening news. They are there, and they are the ones who are, most in danger of slipping away. So there's a lot of on the ground work that's happening that is connecting, our kids with, Alvin Ailey, that, they do work in almost every public school in the city. Every kid in my kid's school knew how to do Revelations by the time they graduated 5th grade. And it's amazing, really, my kid isn't about to graduate from Oberlin as a dance major. So it has a big impact, but there are amazing organizations doing that work on the ground, and we need more of it. Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
And if I could just add to Lucy's very good points. There are a lot of conduits, these organizations, like she said, that they're out there. They're trying to help make connections with students and the institutions and organizations and the theaters and places that make the art. But a lot of the institutions and organizations themselves have educational programming that they often seek funding for, and they often come to the legislature and try to get additional funds for those programmatic sides. Unfortunately, it's hard to come by, and I think that is the difficulty, is that there's sort of very uneven funding for the arts, where there's so many different stresses, economic stresses out there, and everyone thinks that their issue is the biggest and toughest one. So it's very hard for arts organizations and institutions to plan for any kind of education programming if they're not entirely sure if they're going to get funds that year, or they got funds last year and they ran a program with kids, but they may not get it this year. So do they shut down the program? Do they not hire the folks who interacted with the students and so on? There's just so much uncertainty in this world, and they can't just turn it on and off like a switch. So I think creating more continuity is one of the things that I'm fighting for, along with everyone on this call, obviously, and all my colleagues in government, to sort of not do the budget dance so much every year, increase NISCA funding to $150 million a year for programmatic, which will have an impact in a lot of ways on education, and having these be the new floors as far as funding goes, so that there isn't this up and down. One year we can do it, the next year we can't. That doesn't work well, especially when you consider a student's window of opportunity is finite. They're only in 5th grade once, right? And if we don't get that chance to inspire them the way I was inspired when I was younger, and we may not get that chance again.
Thank you. We're lucky to have you as such a strong advocate, and the same for Councilmember Powers. Let's turn to Kimberly Olson for her presentation. And Kim, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm so happy to be here. And also always grateful to have representatives in government like Senator Serrano, like Councilmember Powers, Councilmember Menon, who really understand what the issue is, the nuance of it. And so maybe just a little bit of context about how I come to this. So while I am the executive director of the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable, in a former life, I actually have my teaching certification here in New York State in childhood and special education. While I decided not to go that route, I did work as an artist and a teaching artist, working at off-Broadway, Broadway theaters, and bringing my art form, which is theater, into schools across New York City, predominantly working in District 75 and using theater and musical theater as a teaching tool around conflict resolution, around teaching English language, around helping regulate and understand social emotional well-being and learning those SEL skills, alongside helping students devise original work and find their voice at the end of the day. So a lot of what has been shared resonates very deeply with me. I also am adjunct faculty at City College as well, in their School of Education. And so I'll start off by just saying, for us, our North Star is that we want to see universal arts education for all New York City students. We want that to be sequential. So as Senator Serrano was saying, it can't just be that little blip or, oh, we didn't get the funding that year. We want to see sequential arts education taught in partnership with certified arts teachers and cultural partners that's supported by dedicated, adequate, equitable funding, and also proper accountability and reporting. And so when I say arts education, I'm talking about dance, theater, music, visual arts, media, film, hip hop, creative writing. And all of those are very much alive and present in New York City schools. But unfortunately, they're only available for some students. As I mentioned, we see arts education as that partnership between certified arts teachers and arts and cultural partners. In fact, there were more than 700 arts organizations that worked in New York City schools last year. And Rita, to your question earlier, we estimate there being around 4,000 to 5,000 working artists that are working in our schools each year. And we think that ends up being a lowball estimate. With funding from initiatives like CASA, the Support for Arts Instruction Initiative, and funds, of course, from New York City Public Schools, Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts. So there's been a lot of positives, of course, shared about why arts education is important. Lucy, I believe, mentioned in terms of the strong cultural assets in low wealth communities, yielding 91% higher test scores. But it's also improved attendance, parent engagement, academic success, supporting workforce development, creating safe space for students, especially in that out of school time. And then also often building those skills which can't be measured nor quantified necessarily by a standardized test, like empathy, eye contact, all of which pivotal skills we want our young students, our young people to have as they go through our school system. We at the Roundtable, our campaign is called It Starts with the Arts. And we frequently say success in school and in life starts with the arts. It is very much about laying that foundation so that they have the skills, tools, resources to be able to succeed. Yet, as I said earlier, and has been sort of shared at this call as well, there's inequity, unfortunately, across our city. I'm a numbers gal, so I'll throw some numbers at you. When it comes to middle schoolers, we find that that's where the widest disparity exists. Right now in New York City, only 31% of middle school students are meeting state learning requirements in the arts. When you break that down by school district, the lowest percentage is only 2% of middle school students meeting requirements, and that's in the Morris Park area of the Bronx. The highest percentage is 62%, which is in the Lower East Side. Additionally, while funding for New York City public schools, when you look at funds budgeted, while it represents around 3% of New York City public schools budgeted, the overall budget, when you adjust for inflation, it actually ends up being around $40 million less than it was 7-8 years ago. And I'll tell you, arts education has definitely not gotten less expensive, as a lot of the costs have to do with labor and hard materials. And then to sort of further share sort of where we're at, we believe really arts teachers are the cornerstone of arts in a school. Not only can they be a steady presence, they also are often the ones bringing in really diverse arts and cultural partners and having that knowledge of what the landscape looks like. But right now, around 300 schools lack a certified arts teacher in New York City. So just under, I believe, 20%. It's around 18% of schools. And to Senator Serrano's really smart point, inconsistent funding really makes it difficult then as well to have a sequential sustained arts programming. Especially, I applaud principals. They are, as the financial leaders of their school, constantly making difficult decisions. But it shouldn't necessarily be at the expense of, oh, do I have an arts program or something else? Let's see. I will say, just to add a bright spot to this, according to a recent survey done of schools last year in New York City, 9 out of 10 schools reported that arts were central to their school's core instructional mission. So we know that folks are seeing the value of arts education in their school. Of course, I think as just a overall looming piece to all of this too is, of course, shifts in federal funding. Of course, at the U.S. Department of Education, knowing that Title I, III, IV funds all can be used for arts education. Many arts organizations are now experiencing issues around NEA funding, the National Endowment for the Arts, with uncertainty about being able to access those funds, as there are several assurances of compliance that go along with that. Anything related to certifying you're not using paper straws, to concepts around gender ideology. I'll also note, in terms of other pieces of uncertainty on our end, of course, our foundation aid, and wanting to make sure that the foundation aid formula at the state level, as our state is reimagining what that looks like, although I'm not an expert in this particular piece, I know that what was proposed in the governor's original budget would actually take funds away from New York City public schools. And so wanting to ensure that the updated foundation aid formula takes into consideration the breadth of student need that is within our school. And then, of course, the last one is actually class size mandate. As a former teacher, I want to see small class sizes. That is when I think our educators, our young people can succeed. But I want to make sure that there's a plan so that, as Councilmember Menon was saying, the arts room doesn't necessarily become repurposed as another space, or an arts teacher doesn't become reassigned to another area. And I point to those pieces in particular because that's exactly what we saw happen during the pandemic. And in talking with many colleagues and friends who are working in schools, they're now relegated to art on a cart. Or I was talking to a parent last week whose arts classroom is now the storage closet for their school. And so all of these different components are sort of make up that arts of what's happening in arts education in our city. But I think that the case has definitely been made here of why this is a value, why it's important. And that's very much why the roundtable advocates, as part of our It Starts with the Arts campaign. We want to see an arts teacher in every school. We want to see transparency, especially to Senator Serrano's point, in where arts is happening, where isn't it? That is access, that's participation, that's quality. It's one thing to say 99% of schools have art. Is it that they're singing the Star Spangled Banner, or do they have a robust music teacher and like program that is happening with all the fixings? So that increased transparency piece, we'd like to see funding for the Department of Cultural Affairs, and of course funding for the Department of Cultural, the New York State Council on the Arts as well, knowing the integral way that arts and cultural organizations work in partnership with certified arts teachers. Yeah, I can also share sort of our campaign page just with more information, how to get involved. There is a hearing that the City Council is holding on April 8th at 10 a.m. It is a joint oversight hearing between the Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations and Committee on Education that is on arts education. And so we're really, really excited about that. It's a great moment. If this is something that matters to you, submit testimony, come down to City Hall. I will be there. We are going to be rallying in front beforehand as well. So I'll pause there and answer any questions if helpful.
Thank you. Taina, I think, has a
Thank you, Kim. You're such an expert and a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate you and everything you're doing on behalf of our city, our kids, our families. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the elected officials that are on the Zoom, which is our goal at the end of this joint committee meeting is to pass a resolution that we will present to the full board. You said like 5 things that I would add to it, but if you had to narrow it down to 2 to 3 things that we should be advocating for, what would those be?
Yeah. If I had to narrow it down, I would narrow it down to an arts teacher in every school, bridging that gap for the 290 schools currently lacking one. I would call for increased transparency around arts access, participation, and quality. And then at the state level, I would call for arts education to be codified as part of a well-rounded education. And there's a Senate and Assembly bill.
That's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. Arts education is, New York State is one of only 18 or 19 states that has not codified arts education as part into education law per the Every Student Succeeds Act. Most of our regional neighbors have as well, so we're following behind. There are bills at the state Senate and Assembly that I can pass along the numbers. They just got reintroduced as of last week or the week before, but helpful to have advocacy on that front.
Thank you, super helpful. And if I could ask a clarifying question, just just thinking about what Councilmember Menon stated in terms of the importance of having a dedicated arts room that's not like a converted computer room, right? What are the figures? I'm just going to assume you seem, again, like a wealth of knowledge, so I bet you know the answer to this. So you talked about an arts teacher in each school. What is more common, to have an arts teacher but no dedicated arts room? Or like, can you talk to us a little bit about citywide and then in our district, like what those numbers look like?
Yeah. So it was interesting, as Councilmember Menon was talking, I was like, oh, I wonder where we're at in terms of that for this year. I will say the way that the New York City Public Schools has been sharing data recently doesn't help give a very clear answer.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
So they break down arts classrooms by arts discipline. So like I can tell you
computer science, right? Or something?
Yeah. By like, 38% of schools have a dance classroom. 59 have a music classroom. But there could be schools like LaGuardia that have a dance room, a music room, a theater room. So that's something that we're hoping actually get information about at the upcoming city council hearing, is to understand how many schools actually have at least one dedicated art space, how many schools currently do not. Because that's also sort of part of our campaign, is we want to make sure that these arts rooms are included in sort of the city's blue book, that they are clearly marked as arts, as special spaces, so that we can try to add some layer of protection to them.
Thank you. And just a clarifying question again, I want to make sure our resolution is reflective of what the real need is. When you talk about an arts teacher in every school, are you talking about the full spectrum of pre-K to 12? Okay.
Oh, 100%.
Thank you.
There's a member of the public, Deborah Freeman, who has her hand raised. If we could go to Deborah. Thank you, John.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, is there anything, I know the city budget is coming up, and if there's any particular push that could be supported in terms of city budget funding for arts programming?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Deborah. So I'll say on the budget front, I'm sure probably has come up within the education committee. So federal ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act, federal stimulus money that came out of the pandemic ended up funding and buoying a lot of programming across New York City schools, arts education in particular. So we're really grateful to our friends in the council who last year gave us sort of a one-year funding allocation of $41 million to continue funding the programs that had been funded by that federal stimulus funding. I will say those aren't necessarily new programs. A lot of them already existed. Just sort of the stream and how they were funded changed during the pandemic to account for what was going on in the world. However, that funding is now again at risk. This is funding for programs that arts initiatives serving students with disabilities, our pre-K, 3K arts programming there, arts for multilingual learners, as well as arts funding that goes out to every school. So the roundtable is a part of a broader coalition called the Coalition for Equitable Education Funding, who are doing fabulous work. It's over 120 organizations across the city. And as part of that call, it's extending and baselining at-risk arts education funding, which amounts to $41 million.
May I ask a question before we go to any discussion of a resolution? You mentioned, Kim, learning requirements for the arts. Is that something, and maybe Senator Serrano might have some knowledge about this as well. Is that something that is, I don't know what learning requirements there are for art, and is that something that's a standard in New York City too, and is it being met throughout the city?
I just sent John a private link that has the learning requirements as spelled out by the state, but essentially in the early childhood space, it's that education program should include programs around creative play, dramatic play, creative art. In those elementary grades, it more so has to do with number of instructional hours that a student is receiving in the arts. And that can be taught by a certified arts teacher or by a cultural partner or by another person at the school. Then at the middle school level, the requirement is that students must receive 2 1/2 units of arts instruction, but they should be in 2 different disciplines. So a half unit of music, a half unit of dance. And we're seeing many schools are struggling with that in terms of having the certified arts teacher there or having a certified arts teacher at all at that level. And then at the high school level as well, the requirement is for 1 unit or 1 full year of arts instruction in one of the disciplines. And to that end, we're really excited to see the Board of Regents include in the recently shared Portrait of a New York State Graduate arts. Participation in the arts is included within that. And so as they're re-envisioning what New York State graduation requirements looks like, arts and cultural competence is built into that plan as well.
Thank you.
And before Senator Serrano jumps in, I think, Senator, not to put you on the spot, but sort of to put you on the spot, I think to address the point that Kim made, which is alarming, that the state of New York is, I believe you said, Kim, one of only 18 states that doesn't codify arts as a core curriculum. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay. Senator, can you speak? I know you have been a deep champion, but can you speak a bit to, without getting into the politics, of sort of why that has been the case?
Well, it should be alarming to everyone. And as I mentioned earlier, that even the sort of rules, for lack of a better term, that are in place for arts instruction, we have no way of knowing if I'd audit, because what was happening is that we really had no mechanism to get like this data from schools or from school teachers if they're actually fulfilling the mandate. So that's one side of it, which would be the compliance and the audit. And then the other side of the legislation that was mentioned, Kim, and I'm assuming you were talking about the Rachel May Senate bill. Again, you would think that this would be already enshrined in state law, but like a lot of surprises, it's not. And I'm sure, education folks would say, well, we're doing this anyway. We don't need to do this legislation. It's happening. It's not. It's happening in very uneven places. You have certain school districts that have more money, and they're able to do all of this. And then you have certain school districts throughout the state or places in upstate that they're not able to hire art teachers or have money for instruments or have money for set design or costume design, whatever the case may be. There is a lack of there's sort of an uneven, and that's why kids, like you said, like what was mentioned earlier, in wealthier neighborhoods, they can go to public school and get this, and then if you're in other neighborhoods, that it's very uneven and they're not able to do it. So we do have to pass Rachel May's bill. I'm going to do all that I can to try to help get that over the finish line. And that's just the beginning. Then we need audits. We need to make sure compliance is actually happening.
I could not agree more. I'm very much of the philosophy that what gets measured gets done. And we have to understand where we're at now so that we know where we need to grow to.
Thank you. I just, before Addison, I just want to make a plug for the students of Talent Unlimited High School. Community Board 8 puts on an art show. Senator Serrano has attended, some of our other elected officials. We're very glad for that. But the students in the musical theater section or department of Talented Unlimited have been performing for a few of the shows, and they draw a lot of public enthusiasm. People just gather around and are really excited to see them. And things like that might spread awareness and interest in the arts as well. We're always so thrilled to have them. The amount of energy and talent is really pretty overwhelming. So thank you for that. I'll lower my hand. Addison, do you mind if Judy Schneider has her hand up? And then we go, and then you should go. So John, could you unmute Judy, please?
Senator Serrano, can I go back to what you said earlier? Can you please tell me, I think I missed it. You mentioned your bill S1072. What does that cover?
So S1072 would require the commissioner of the state education department to conduct a statewide audit of compliance for art instruction in schools. So they would have to come up with an auditing plan, and they would have to, it'd be real data. And of course, they resist it because they either say it's happening or they don't want to do it. But I suspect that if a audit was conducted, we would see tragically low compliance with arts education in various places throughout the state of New York. So that bill is I think just a piece of a larger sort of tapestry that was laid out here to engage arts education in a real way. But without, as Kimberly said, if you don't drill down on the data, then we'll never know, and the status quo will just continue. So that's one of a bill that I've been pushing for, one of my own.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Serrano. I see that we have been joined by Molly. Molly, I don't want to, if we can unmute Molly, I don't want to butcher your last name. I don't know if it's Sinak or Sinak. I don't like when people mispronounce my name, which happens often. So please correct me. Thank you for joining us. I like Molly already because we asked Molly to give us like a bio on herself, and she was like, my intro is very simple. So Molly is the Education and Employment Community Organizer with the Center for Independence of the Disabled New York and a member of the Coalition for Equitable Education Funding. And Molly is here to talk to us about the broader need for education funding. Thank you for joining us, Molly. I know you are coming on the heels of another presentation. Senator Serrano, we would love for you to stay, want to be respectful of your time, are so grateful that you have stayed as long as you have. You're a critical champion, and we on Community Board 8 are so grateful to have you in our corner, standing up for kids, families, and communities in our district and more broadly throughout the city and the state. So, but wanted to give you a chance to say something if you wanted to. If not, we'll turn it over to Molly.
No, I'll probably hop off in a little bit, but this is really important for me to hear. Forums like this, I think, are so important for elected officials to hear all of the different ideas that are out there. And then I take this information and I I process it and I work with my colleagues, and it's a very organic process to try to get to better arts education policy and funding. As I mentioned earlier, we've been seeing since the pandemic a really strong fight for more arts funding, and we're moving the needle. For years, it was stagnant. But over the last 3 or 4 years, with the help of Lucy, with the coalitions that have been formed amongst arts organizations, working in tandem with elected officials, we're letting the powers that be, which is all of us, know that the arts are serious. We cannot continue to underfund. And I'm really excited about the future. But this isn't a time to take our foot off the gas. We have to certainly keep fighting until this budget is completed. Hopefully, in the next few days, we'll have the state budget done, and I'm going to keep fighting to get increased arts funding, in particular arts education. So I'll hop off.
Thank
But
you,
I
Senator
look forward
Serrano.
to seeing all of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your service.
Thank you so much. Ditto on all of that Taina said. Thank you.
Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I'm so sorry that I couldn't be here for the first part of the meeting, but I am assuming that you guys were talking about arts funding at the state level. I'm going to be talking about arts funding at a city level, but as a part of a larger city budget fight that we have been having since last year. So I'm going to share my screen, if that's possible. Yes. Just send a request to somebody. We're good? Okay.
Yeah, you should be
great.
good to share your screen.
Perfect. All right. Also, just a heads up to everybody, I tend to talk very, very fast. To quote an interpreter of late, girl, what was happening? Were you being chased? And I won't be able to read the chat. So if anybody needs me to slow down, if someone could like come off mute to let me know if there was a comment so that I can slow down for everybody. Okay, so pardon me. Okay, so the New York City education budget. As I said, or pardon me, as it was said, I am with the Coalition for Equitable Education Funding. We are a group made up of 120 organizations. So obviously this is a group that covers quite a few different demographics in New York City. Now, last year, we had many important education programs at risk of ending because they were funded with expiring federal stimulus funds and expiring city funds. Now, the city continued funding for many key education programs that were at risk of ending. Some programs were continued using one-year city funding, meaning that the funding will expire in June of 2025 unless extended, while other programs were continued long-term using state foundation aid funding. The programs we're going to talk about tonight are the ones that were funded using one-year city funding. So again, these are programs that are at risk of expiring this June, which for anyone keeping track is at the end of June is 3 months away. So the city budget.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Just making sure. So programs continued through one-year city funding dollars include, and I'm going to go through each of these individually. Early childhood education, including 3K, preschool special education, extended day seats, and outreach. Summer programming, arts programming, community schools, learning to work, restorative justice, teacher recruitment, mental health continuum, immigrant family communications and outreach, high impact tutoring, and student success centers. Of those programs, the mayor's preliminary budget extended funding for these two things, meaning that everything else is at risk of being cut at the end of June, meaning next year, it is very possible that students are going to be showing up with all of these things significantly rolled back or eliminated entirely. So first of all, we have 3K and pre-K. Now, $112 million of the overall city budget for 3K is one-year city funding. Last year's budget also included $25 million for extended day seats and $5 million for community outreach. Losing this funding would mean that thousands of 3-year-olds who would have had the chance to attend 3K this fall are going to miss out. Also, as I go through these programs, I do think that it's really important to note why we grouped all of these programs together, not just because they represent these dollars that are at risk of being eliminated, but because they are all tied together. Obviously, the loss of one is going to have a cascading effect and is going to significantly impact everything else. When we talk about losing 3K and pre-K and having to try to fill the gap elsewhere, things like arts programming are inevitably going to fall to the back burner for a lot of things as they try to make up this funding. So keep that in mind as we go through all of these. So preschool special education classes. We are at risk of losing $55 million come the end of this year. Now, last year, New York City Public Schools opened new preschool special education classes to help address the significant shortage. They added seats for about 700 children with disabilities like autism. However, even with this funding, hundreds of preschoolers with disabilities are still waiting for a seat in their legally mandated special education class. Community schools are about to lose $14 million. Community schools obviously are where schools partner with community-based organizations to provide students and their families with comprehensive wraparound services like after-school programs, medical and dental care, and adult education classes. An expiring one-year funding supports more than 50 community schools. So next year, there are going to be potentially 50 less community schools. We are looking at a $12 million cut to restorative justice, which obviously allows more schools to use alternatives to suspensions, keeping students in the classroom while helping them build and repair relationships. And one-year funding represents the majority of the city's investment in restorative justice practices. So without this, restorative justice program is largely going to be erased, unfortunately. The mental health continuum, which helps students with significant mental health needs access expedited mental health care. It currently serves thousands of students at 50 high needs schools. And the funding for this entire initiative is going to expire in June, despite the mayor constantly touting how wonderful this program is. Immigrant family outreach is about to lose $4 million. It strengthens communication with immigrant families, many of whom would otherwise be left without important information about their children's schools. And it is obviously critical for this initiative to continue, given the increase in the number of newcomer immigrant families in New York City, as well as changes in federal policies. Student success centers are about to lose $3.3 million. It is currently in more than 30 New York City high schools, and it allows trained youth leaders to build a culture of college going and help their peers with the college admissions process. And here are the last three. We have high impact tutoring at $4 million, teacher recruitment at $10 million, and arts programming at, I have to say, a staggering $41 million. While we're not talking necessarily percentage-wise, it is one of the programs with the largest dollar amount being cut after essentially early childhood education. Early childhood education and arts programming are going to see the highest dollar amount cut. Obviously, we would like to stop this. Our recommendation as a coalition is to include long-term funding for these education programs in the executive budget. Parents, students, and educators need to know that they will be able to rely on these programs next year and beyond, because even though right now we're talking about the danger of these programs expiring in June and students coming to school next year without these programs, right now on the administrative side, how are teachers, how are principals, how is anybody supposed to prepare for the next school year knowing that these programs could be cut? We're not going to invest in any programs that could be gone the next year. We're not going to hire teachers if next year we don't know whether we're going to have the funding for them. So The city also should obviously, pardon me, I'm saying obviously so much tonight, but there is so many obvious things about this. The city should make additional investments that are needed to support students with a focus on those who have the greatest needs. We're looking at our timeline right now. Mayor's preliminary budget was released January 16th. May 1st is the deadline for the mayor to release the executive budget, and the city budget deadline is June 30th. So in this time now, this is the time for us to call the mayor, to call city council members, to ask them to please not cut this funding. Again, that money was given to schools as a part of a federal stimulus package. However, it is not like arts programming suddenly became a need during COVID. It has always been needed by our schools. And now it is time to finally start baselining that, to acknowledge that this is something that students need all the time. So, actions you can take, because why come to a forum with a problem if you're not going to provide solutions? On the left in the purple box, if you scan that QR code, you will be able to send an email that has already been written for you to Mayor Adams, and the QR code on the right will allow you to sign up for updates from our coalition and to get more involved. As the city budget process goes on, we just had the preliminary budget hearings. There are going to be more in the future. You can expect there to be a lot more rallies, a lot more actions, a lot more testifying. Please sign up for actions. This way you can stay updated and get involved with things as they come. So I'll give everyone a second to scan these, and then I will stop sharing and take questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Molly, for such an informative and invaluable presentation on the state of the budget in New York City education. Are there any questions? Okay, well then, thank you. But before everyone goes, let's talk about a resolution.
Hi, I just had one question. Thank you, Molly, for that informative presentation. I asked this of our, we actually had city council members that were on earlier, Councilmember Powers and Councilmember Menon were on, as was State Senator Serrano, who I think you saw at the end. I asked each of them, and also the previous presenter, we want to present a resolution. Alita will talk about this in a second. I don't actually think we have quorum to pass a resolution, but we will draft a resolution. If there was one or two things that you would want our community board to be calling on the city council, the mayor, the state, to change or pass, what would that be? And John, if you could unmute Molly, please. Thank you.
So I would say, and if you like, I'm sure that the coalition has language about this too. If you would like to draft something in the future, we'd be happy to provide that language.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. We would ask for the restoration of all the programs that were at risk of being eliminated or rolled back, that were essentially only funded through one-year city funding that had been previously funded through the federal stimulus dollars. We would ask for all of that funding to be included in any resolution, because as I said, all of these programs really do feed into one another. They all affect one another. And so we're looking at that group as a whole. And also that was just even that enormous list, that enormous presentation, that is not all of the programs at risk of being cut. It's a really hefty number. And the fact that they used that money to address ongoing needs without kind of planning for the fact that the needs would still most likely be ongoing is something that we're really trying to protect and correct. So we would ask that, and I can again give you the exact language because I got lost in my own sentence structure a little.
No, I appreciate that. We will probably reach out to you for that.
Right.
My co-chair Addison and I were joking. We were like, she has 50 slides. It was like the
Yeah.
world.
Oh, yeah, don't worry. I'm
sure you had a lot more to talk about.
The other half is our presentation on foundation aid and the state budget, which also impacts art programming. But for
Yeah.
tonight, we're
You were
talking city
focusing
budget.
on the one fire. We appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us, and we will
Thank you.
likely follow up. You're welcome to stay on. There's also, just so you know, I know you missed the beginning, but these are all recorded, as I'm sure you can see, and they're on YouTube, so we can send you a link to the recording if you want to
Yeah,
listen
that'd
to
be
it on
great.
your subway ride.
And feel
That would
free
be
to send
awesome.
the link to the to the recording of this that will be on YouTube to anyone that you think might gain from the information presented, not only by you, but by the council members, Senator Serrano and Kim and Lucy as well, because that might be helpful. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and then John just put the link to the YouTube in there. I wanted to move on our goal. Thank you everyone who joined, who has stayed on. I have the privilege of also being the co-chair of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, and there are rules about what we can pass at the committee level. This is a joint committee meeting. So between the members of the board and public members of each of the committees, there are 15 members, and unfortunately, with some overlap, so that's like Addison, you're on both committees, so that like takes down to 14, but we don't have enough community board members on. But if I could propose Alita, I believe, and if you can correct me, Addison looked this up, that your committee has a meeting in April. Is that correct?
Yes, at the end of April.
Okay. So I would propose that Addison has been working on a draft of a resolution that is reflective of the many very important things that were brought up here. That we draft a resolution that then you can present at the Arts Committee. I don't want to sign Addison up, but I'm happy to show up at
I'm
that.
happy to do it. Yeah, I've been taking notes the whole time. So
I've done this. We sort of had a issue where we've passed a resolution at the and there wasn't quorum, and it's a whole thing. So I think if it's okay with you, if we present a resolution based on everything we heard today at the Arts Committee and then bring it to the full board, I think that's the best next step.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have enough members, although I do note that a newly appointed public member of the Arts Committee is here. So I'm really glad to see you, Chelsea.
Oh, I'm counting Chelsea.
So we will, that's a great idea. We'll add it to the agenda. I think we could make it even the first item, since it could be then with you guys, and then talk about the art show that we're having with
this is what you get for having such a big committee, Alita.
Exactly. And we can work on,
but we have a bunch of enthusiastic and highly hardworking people. Judy, you have your hand up. John, could you unmute Judy, please?
Yeah, if you're meeting the end of April, that means it won't be voted on until the middle of May, and the final budget is going to be done in June.
Yeah, I realize that.
That's a really little late for the resolution. So if you prepare a resolution, there's no reason why one of us from the floor at the full board meeting can't propose to put a resolution on the floor.
We and Alita, you're
for the full board to consider. It was considered at the meeting, but there wasn't enough, there weren't enough people present in order to pass it. But certainly at the community board meeting, there will be enough people present to pass a resolution.
Does that comment?
I think we're better off doing this sooner than later if we want the resolution to have any meaning.
Well, it'll be a month in advance if we could do it at the full board. Is that a question of new business, or does it come up if we do? I guess we could talk to Valerie about that.
Yeah, I think we will. And Judy, I don't disagree. I think and our plan is to have the resolution drafted and ready. It's just that in the interest of time, us taking a vote now is
no, not vote now. Let's just
so Judy, what we can do
resolution, read it, and let's just critique it and get it all ready, and then John can have that under new business, let's say, for this committee. Okay, it can be brought up under new business. Somebody from the floor can raise their hand and say, I'd like to put this motion.
And that'll be our committee.
everybody- Yeah, and everybody will have it on their screen.
So
Rita.
I don't understand why we're not voting on it tonight. Basically, we want the mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, we want the mayor to restore the budget to what it was this year and not make any further cuts. So couldn't we say that we want to have the budget, preserved and vote on that, and that we would approve that and ask for his approval? I don't know. I don't see why we're not voting on something tonight.
But we don't have, I mean, essentially, and again, like I've this in the past, the reality is like, we don't even have close to quorum. So there are a total of 14 members between public members and full community board members between both committees. So we don't even have close to quorum. And so it would be the same. Go ahead.
What would a quorum be?
It would be probably 7. We have 6 people.
Yeah.
So we're short 1. But we can't do it now, but I think maybe it would be helpful if we could quickly go through the resolution that Addison has been working on, just at least so that we have the resolution portion of it, and we'll work on the whereas clauses to comport with what everyone has said. And that was a great idea, Taina, asking everyone for their big asks.
Yeah, Addison, do you want to run through? Addison had mentioned that he actually just sent it to me. He had to step off, but the points were, so 7 points: more arts funding in the state and city budget, supporting Senator Serrano's bill that he mentioned that has not passed for several years. Third, consistent funding for sequential arts programming in all New York City schools. Fourth, an arts teacher in every school. Fifth, increased transparency around arts access. 6, arts education to be codified in the state budget, which also goes in tandem with I believe with a bill, which we will make sure we mention. And the broader funding to replace federal funding that was lost that Molly had mentioned. So it'll be a long resolution. Rita, I totally hear you and want to vote on it now, but I think it would just make sense for us to present it. We'll go back to Valerie and figure out how it makes more sense. I agree, Alita, we probably don't have to wait till the arts committee can come at the next full board, but it's an important issue, and I just think there are too many members of our committee that are not here.
I agree. And I would also suggest that in the whereas clauses, we have the reasons that arts education is so critical to the well-being of the society, and how it matters that the wealthier districts have. This is a citywide issue, I guess, like much of what you do in the education committee, and it's important. So we have Judy and then Rita.
Yes, any bills that you mention, Jonathan, can you please attach those bills to the minutes so that people can see them? Because Michelle will be the first person with her hand up saying, we can't vote on anything. We haven't seen the bill. We don't know what we're voting on. So if we're making reference to a city or a state bill, that has to be attached so that the people can read what's in the bill and we don't get any negative feedback from any of our board members.
Good point, Judy. Rita?
Could we at least say that all the members who attended this meeting, that we all voted in approval? Or should we take that vote? Or does anybody not want to vote on this, and at least you can say to Valerie that 7 people attended and 7 people voted in favor.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I think I read out the points that we plan to include. Obviously, we don't have it all written out, but I think we can absolutely call I think we can absolutely call that for a vote and acknowledge that we didn't have quorum, but that all the members present were in agreement that in the general spirit of the resolution. So
Is there anyone who objects? No, good. So then we're unanimous on that. This is really important, and I'm very glad that we were able to do this and do it now before the budget is formalized. And for Senator Serrano to bring it back before the state budget is done as well, for whatever it's worth among all the people in the state. So I think this is good, and having that kind of unanimous participation and vote, even though we're not enough for quorum, I would hope would be influential at the full board.
yeah, and John, if you could just take note of the board members that are on here, I'm just gonna read out loud the full board members. So we have myself, Taina Barrera, we have Alita Camp, Addison Lev, we have Judy Schneider, Rita Popper, public member Chelsea Brandis. I think I captured everyone that is on. Unless there is old business or new business, I think I speak for all of us, Alita, myself, and Addison, who had to step off briefly. Thanking you for attending, and we're excited to present this resolution, as I feel like the various perspectives and elected officials agreed on with various different levels of sort of issues. This is important. It's important to our community. It's important to our students and to our families. Alita, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Molly's still here, so I want to thank her again for the detail and the knowledge that you brought to this discussion, and for the speakers that have left to just thank them in extensia. And for John, thank you so much for all your hard work as always during these meetings, and for the board members who stuck around on this important topic. Thank you, Taina and Addison, for agreeing to work on this, and everyone have a good evening.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much.